All right, so back in 2023 on May 6th, Dead & Company performed at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, and for this performance, John would debut a new amplifier, to us at least, that we had never seen him use before. The kicker, as you guys can see on your screen, is that the amplifier was covered up by this red curtain. John has been secretive about some of the gear he's used in the past, especially in kind of more modern times, you know, the whole blacking out pedals and trying to prevent people from using his name to essentially increase the price of gear is his main kind of reasoning behind it. But this was a new level of hiding something, especially when it came to being an amplifier. Some of the theories that went out initially were, okay, well, maybe it also could be a piece of rack gear or something like that, or some odd reverb tank or something like that that he's trying to hide. But a lot of those theories kind of went out the window right away, because if there's anything like that, he could have just had it to the side of the stage or with the other rack gear that he would just frequently use for Dead & Company. So the fact that there were two speaker cabs on the stage as well really lent this to just, it had to be an amplifier. That's what it had to be. Now, if John really wanted to hide what he was using, he could have just had the amp off stage, hidden, completely isolated with like an actual piece of Tolex or whatever covering the entire front of it instead of a curtain, have it somewhere hidden where no one can absolutely see it, even just placed behind one of these speaker cabs, the speaker cab that it was being plugged into. Have it behind there, and then you wouldn't really see it. But instead, it had this cheeky little red curtain, and it was front and center on stage where everyone could see. So at this point, the game was on, the challenge was set. Let's try and figure out what he's using, because I think this was a tiny bit cheeky of John, in my opinion, to see, okay guys, can you figure out what I'm actually using here now? Now, as 2023 went on, John continued to use this amplifier with that red curtain on the front of it. But a few shows after the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, we got a photo from the crowd that showed part of the curtain actually to the side, where you could see a little bit of each kind of edge of the amplifier. And it became very clear from that point that the actual amplifier head was a lot smaller than the kind of enclosed head shell. It wasn't like a cape or a curtain was like draped over the front of it. No, it was actually placed inside of a different head shell almost that then had the curtain across and in front of it. Based on what we've seen here, at first glance, it kind of looked like a Marshall. It was like, okay, it kind of, the gold plate on the front, the black grill cloth on it as well. It just kind of looked like a Marshall, but that wasn't what we thought it was. The prevailing theory that started going around was that it was a Dumble Small Special, which is a really kind of rare piece of Dumble's history that, from my understanding at least, he never made a ton of them, but it kind of was the thing that maybe made sense in the context of John's gear, and we're going to talk about this amplifier in just a little bit. This amplifier would see use continue on to the Sphere's 2024 residency, where John brought out this monster amp rig with the 50-watt overdrive special, a Fender twin reverb with a Soldano space box on top of it, and then this amplifier with that red curtain as well. But only a few shows into the 2024 Sphere residency was this amplifier actually replaced for an Ultraphonics modded Bandmaster instead, and that continues to be what John is using at the Sphere in 2025, that triple amp setup. Then it kind of almost felt like maybe we'll never actually know what John was using, have no dead-on confirmation of what that amplifier was. However, we actually now do. Now, I'm pulling this information from the Guitar World May 2025 issue that predominantly features John Mayer and Bob Weir, of course highlighting Dead & Company's residency at the Sphere in both 2024 and the upcoming one in 2025. This magazine will be linked in the description down below if you guys want to check it out. I highly recommend picking it up because the entire interview is fantastic. Lots of great pieces of information and just storytelling from both John and Bob. But kind of indirectly in the interview here, John answers the question as to what this amplifier was just by going over his amp rig for the 2024 Sphere residency. So the question asks, it looked like you had a few Dumble amps on stage as well as a Fender twin reverb, talking about that previous residency. John replies, yeah, I really like the Small Special, and there was an Overdrive Special and maybe a Dumble modded Bandmaster and then the Fender twin. Those are on stage. And then from that point on, John goes into talking about the whole ISO cab situation with the silent stage at the Sphere. I've covered this a lot on the channel. I'm not going to dive into the rest of his question answer that he provides for here or the rest of the interview in here, but I just wanted to pull out that first bit, that first part to the answer of this question. And I don't think John obviously was trying to just be like, oh, I'm supposed to be super secretive about what I'm using, but he did just casually kind of say, I really like the Dumble Small Special, completely confirming that what we kind of thought John was using was actually what he was using, which is, we know, one of those rare cases where the Mayor gear community was able to kind of come together and piece just based on a few, that one shot of, you know, the curtain where it wasn't fully covered, that it was actually a Dumble Small Special. But what exactly is a Dumble Small Special? To the best of my ability for this video, at least based on the research I have done, you know, like all things Dumble, there's a lot of mystery and kind of secrecy behind a lot of what he was doing. So this is just what I've been able to come up with for you guys and try and sort out what appears to be like the most correct information from different sources. From what I've been able to gather, this amplifier predated the Dumble Overdrive Special. Dumble was building these before the ODSs, kind of in the early to mid 70s. As far as the Small Special is concerned, as far as I can tell, they made two versions in terms of wattages, 50 watts and 100 watts. It's difficult to say exactly what one Mayor is using. There was one listing and kind of documentation around one, and I'll just read for you guys a piece of the kind of commentary around it. It says that this amp is basically a 100 watt overdrive special minus the overdrive channel. This circuit was also used as a bass amplifier. It has a very full headroom and wonderful sparkly clean tones. The level control is a second volume inserted later in the circuit, but before the phase inverter, so it allows for subtle adjustments to the gain characteristics of the preamp section. This amplifier is not about crunchy overdrive. So based on that bit of information there, an overdrive special, but without the overdrive channel, you can kind of see how this amplifier would predate the ODS and kind of the clean platform that then Dumble went on to create and build upon to make the ODS. In terms of the context of Mayor's gear, ODSs are amplifiers we see him using all the time. I mean, that 50 watt Silverface ODS that he's been using with Dead & Company, the entire solo tour even, is clearly one of John's favorite amplifiers in the more modern era. So something that is perhaps a bit rarer, predates that amplifier, but has a lot of headroom, very great clean tones, is something that just would be right up his alley in terms of a great sounding guitar amplifier for the tones that John wants, and even just the feel like under his fingers and the response of a Dumble amplifier. Back in 2015, Nashville Amplifier Service had one of these go through their store just for a checkup, and the post highlights that it's a great little amp. This Small Special utilizes a Fender Bassman iron and predates the legendary Overdrive Special. Characteristically, very blackface Bassman-like, but optimized to a different level. Very straight ahead sound, great amp. Interesting that before Howard Dumble came up with his legendary overdrive circuit, there was an underlying great circuit to begin with, and there's some shots, this one being serial number 005. And then in 2018, there was another store that actually had one come up for sale, a 100 watt version, and that's kind of, from what I've been able to find, the last one that was really up for sale. At least relatively speaking, before John maybe could have, or that would have made sense in terms of a timeline for John to purchase. So hard to say, but here's some shots of another one that was up for sale back in 2018, this one being a 100 watt version. And in doing my research for this video around the Small Special, I stumbled upon a post from Morgan Amplifiers where they talk about one of their amplifiers and how it has a pretty big connection to the Dumble Small Special, being the SW50R. The post says, I often get asked about what amp the SW50 was based on. Here is the story. 12 years ago, a customer brought me a Small Special Dumble, much like this one in the picture here, which is the one from that listing from 2018. It had been built in 1974 and was using pulled Fender transformers. The output was a super reverb, the power and choke were from an old Bandmaster, and I was asked to make a clone by the customer, but after playing the amp and noticing its limitations, I suggested making an amp that kept the spirit of the original, but with some edits and changes to make it more useful and to update some of the things that Dumble himself changed on amps like the Steel String Singer. Some of the changes like the parallel reverb and a mid-control were my additions to the original, original. Things I omitted were things like a microphone input switch and the accent switch. The accent made the amp unusable in the off position. This amp is really a great punchy, warm clean in the style of the 150 watt steel string singer. Great for SRV Mayer style clean tones, but with a distortion pedal, this amp will even do death metal. Just a fun slice of amp history that I got to play around with. I think that's so cool, just to know some history behind one of these Morgan amplifiers that, okay, when you talk about a small special being an amplifier that you don't really hear a lot around, you know, it's always the Dumble ends, the steel string singers, the overdrive specials when it comes to Dumble amplifiers. This one, because I think it was so early and predated a lot of that stuff, is one that not a lot of people have focused on and not one that would come to mind. But the fact that Morgan amplifiers actually had one go through their store, and that's what they based the SW50R on, makes for a pretty cool option if you're wanting something that would do the Mayer thing, just because they actually had a small special to use as an example in the foundation, and even the knowledge of how the amp did have some shortcomings that Alexander Dumble even went on to adjust. They kind of went on and took that same original really great circuit and then kind of evolved it in their own way a little bit, very much like what Dumble did. So I thought that was really cool to actually see. There is kind of a modern clone of one of these amplifiers, which I never expected, and this is definitely an amplifier I would love to check out. Unfortunately, it seems like it's pretty hard to find because in all of Reverb, as of right now, me making this video, there's only one up there. It's 2,500 Canadian, which is, you know, all things considered, pretty affordable, but they definitely seem to be a little bit harder to actually find. But if you're looking for something that's in the vein of doing great Mayer tones, the Dumble sound with Dead & Company and John's own solo career, that definitely seems like a pretty cool option. And the last thing I'll mention in regards to the small special, just some cool bits of information. My really good friend, Gabe Bergerman, if you guys are into the Mayer guitar space, you know who Gabe is. He actually got to see one of these amplifiers in person back in 2023 as well. This one was on display, and it was actually built for Graham Nash of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Really cool piece of history that Graham Nash actually had one of these early Dumbles built for him. So Gabe has some really great photos that you guys are just seeing on your screen of that example of the amplifier. So there definitely are a few out there, but it certainly seems to be something that's not quite as common as like an overdrive special, for example. But that kind of wraps up this video. I just thought it'd also be cool to just address the fact that Mayer did confirm that he was using the Dumble Small Special for like 2 years basically with Dead & Company, but still just a pretty cool piece of Dumble's history that John has, and maybe he's had it for longer than that 2018 one. It's impossible to say, but John sure has a lot of cool things in the vault that we haven't seen yet, but just kind of one of those funny things where it's covered by a curtain, we saw a piece of it, the community kind of sorted out what it was, but we never knew, and then John was like, yeah, I really like it. But it's kind of interesting that he said he really liked it, but he's also replaced it by that Bandmaster, so he must be liking the Bandmaster a little bit more, but who knows, maybe with Dead & Company in 2025, we'll see the small special return, especially now that he's kind of clarified what it is. Maybe we'll just get to get a full dead-on look at the one that John is using, and it won't be covered up by that curtain anymore. Only time will tell, but I just thought this would be kind of cool to actually address and document on the channel, John confirming what this amplifier was. Like I've said, the Guitar World May 2025 issue featuring Dead & Company is going to be linked in the description down below for you guys to check out. It's a fantastic interview, must have for any John Mayer fan, and it's just good to always support directly those guys, and the fact that they did this kind of interview with John and Bob Weir asked a lot of great questions. Go and check it out for sure. And until the next video, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Take care. I'll see you on the next one.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.